Hello, BookTube. I'm here with another castaway. It's Debs at Rainer Reads Stuff. And our connection seems to be a little iffy at times. So there might be a few occasions where we talk over each other or things get a little jittery. So do please bear with us. But Debs, if you wanted to tell us something about yourself and your and your channel, what you read on your channel.
Okay, I'm Debs. I mostly live in this book shack. My channel is called Rainer Reads Stuff. This book shack is a glorified garden shed in my back garden. I've had it about 2 years. I absolutely love it. My husband calls it my hobbit hole because I'm short, I think, as well. But I read pretty much anything. I am a great joiner, so I love the book events and buddy reads and reading events that go on BookTube. So I read a wide variety of stuff. My go-to comfort read is crime, but I read a lot of classics. I love science fiction. I love non-fiction history books and travel writing, and I'll try pretty much anything.
Okay. And what was your day job, or did you want to talk about that, or things that you did in the past?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I spent 4 years as a journalist. I started off as a junior local news reporter. Worked in various different bits and pieces. I was a travel editor for a while, an editor for a couple of papers. I took voluntary redundancy 4 years ago, and at that time I was the group production editor for a series of weekly papers and a daily paper that went from Cambridge in the middle of England down to the south coast. So we had 27 weekly papers and one daily paper. I now live in Nottingham, where I'm not from, but I moved here 6 years ago, and got married nearly 6 years ago. I have 2 daughters and my first grandchild, he'll be 2 in May. And that's about it, really. That's me.
Okay. And before we get to the books, this is how we'll do just for people watching. Once we've done every sort of section or every book, we'll go to some questions. So we have a number of viewers now. Coffee Nut saying hello. Hello, Coffee Nut. Someone here from Genre Books. Hi, Gavin.
Oh, I saw him last week.
Yeah. And Joseph C. Hello. Hello, all. And Pat from Book Chat with Pat, who will be she'll be a victim. I mean, a castaway at some point as well. I hope.
Excellent.
And Mick Holland. Good evening. Hello.
Hiya.
So yeah, did you enjoy doing journalism? Like, did you enjoy the editing more than the actual writing, or vice versa?
I absolutely loved being a journalist. I was really lucky, actually. When I was about 14, you had to go on work experience somewhere, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And my mum suggested that I call the local paper and see if they'd take me on a week's work experience. And I went there and I absolutely loved it. And they seemed to like me as well. So from then until I left school, every holidays, if they needed stuff done at the weekends, I was at the office. And they put up with me. And I started doing my A-levels. So you take O-levels you used to take O-levels at 16 and then go on to a 2-year A-level course. And I started doing the 2-year A-level course when a job came up at the local paper. And the editor didn't ask me if I wanted the job. He called my parents because I was under 18 and he wanted to check with them whether or not they'd allow me to leave full-time education and start work. And when I started, they gave me a full 3.5-year indentured apprenticeship. And he told me that he thought it was probably the only way he was going to get rid of me. And that if I didn't get a job with them, I would continue to turn up at weekends and holidays and things and plague him for the rest of his life. So I was very lucky. Not many people get that sort of opportunity. And I absolutely loved it. And then the further up the, managerial scale you get, the more rubbish it gets. And for the last couple of years, I loved designing newspapers, absolutely loved it, as much as I loved reporting. But then you're stuck between the higher tier management who want to constantly reduce the workload, the workforce, and you're the person who has to tell people that you've worked with for many, many years that their job's now redundant. And that bit I hated. And also I did an awful lot of miles. I'd leave here, Nottingham, at 3:30 on a Tuesday morning and drive to Guildford in Surrey, work there for the day, stay overnight with my mother, who lived local to there, and then leave there at 3:30 in the morning and go to Chelmsford in Essex, where I would stay overnight in a hotel. Then from there, I would go to Cambridge the following day, and then I would come home. So I did loads and loads of miles at ridiculous times of the morning. And I was tired. I was exhausted after many years of doing that. So, yeah, the combination of having to fire people all the time who didn't deserve being fired, and long hours. We did a compressed week, so we did full time over 4 days. But often I'd be in the office at 6 o'clock in the morning and night the evening paper. And so I wouldn't finish work till 7:30, 8 in the evening. And it was exhausting.
Yeah, I could see that. So while you were doing journalism and writing stories, what is the weirdest or strangest story you had to report on that you can think of? Or were there any?
There were, actually. The weirdest one.
Something that you could talk about.
Yeah. There's a couple of really odd ones. When I was a junior reporter, my boss appeared in the office one day and decided that I was the person who was most likely to pass as a checkout assistant in a supermarket. And he sent me to meet these two weird men who had enticed, now let me get this right, the daughter of our accountant to some scabby old caravan where they thought she might have been molested. And they claimed they were clairvoyants. So they sent me along to see what would happen. But they didn't want to put me in any danger. So my news editor was in a bush outside the caravan. Our managing director was up a tree. I'm sitting there in this caravan and our photographer's head kept popping up at the window just to check I was okay. That was weird. I've made some pretty good mistakes as well. over the years. So when I first started working, I was 16. They sent me along to a housing meeting, and there were a couple of items on this housing meeting. One was land was going to be released to the council cheaply, and they were going to put new council houses on it, so social housing, to reduce the housing list. And the other one was a self-build housing scheme. And I sort of merged the two together and said that all 200 people who'd been offered council housing under this cheaper scheme had to build the houses themselves. And the housing officer the following morning said he reckoned 196 of those people had been on the phone to him going, "What the hell you did?" Luckily, he also had a sense of humour and he forgave me, which was nice.
Oh, the next thing is, I guess, what would be your favorite story that you covered? But there's a couple quick comments here. Pat says she loves the story of you going undercover to get a story. And Gavin asks, how did the clairvoyants not know it was a ruse?
Well, who knows?
Because they weren't clairvoyants?
Possibly. Quite possibly.
But you cannot comment.
I cannot comment on that.
So your most favorite story that sort of that you really enjoyed and you were really proud, I guess, to write about.
I think one of the stories that I was most proud of, there was a little girl in the locality of one of the local papers I was working for, and she had liver failure, and we launched an appeal for her and fundraised. Now we're going back to the early 1980s here. We fundraised quite a number of thousands of pounds to get her sent off to America for some specialist treatment and a liver transplant. And as far as I know, she's still alive and healthy today.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a real community effort that we'd launched it, and there was a great sense of, I mean, it was literally jumping up and down and cheering when we found out that she'd had the transplant and it had all gone well. Yeah, that was pretty special.
Oh, yeah, that definitely would. So, yeah, is there anything else that sort of sticks out in your mind before we go on to the books about your
my
career?
mistake.
Well, other mistakes, or
Oh yeah, this one's a good one. This one's a real doozy. There was a local councillor in our area whose name was Mel. His first name was Mel. And his surname, I think it was Calvert. Anyway, he was involved in this long-running story, and it was going to be the front page lead for that week's paper, this story that he was involved in. And I wrote it, and unfortunately, Mel Brooks had just brought out a new film. And all the way through this story, rather than call him Mel Calvert, I called him Mel Brooks. And when my story was edited, nobody noticed. And so it came out like that as the front page lead. And the man was furious. I mean, he was spitting feathers. I thought it was quite funny. But yeah, he really didn't.
that's a good mistake, though. That is funny.
But that's why we have an editing process, right?
Yeah, yeah, you would think so. Pat says that's a great story about the little girl with the transplant. It is. It is a great story. Okay. Well, let's start with the books. I've got your list here, but you said they were in no specific order, so you grab whatever you've got there first.
Okay. What I tried to go for here is a variety of genres that was going to keep me entertained. Okay. So, should we start with the biggest one?
I know which one that will be. Yeah.
Miserable. Victor Hugo. I read this for the first time last year with a group, and I absolutely loved it. I even loved the boring bits. I even loved the, let's go down the sewers for a very, very, very long time.
But not long enough. I'll keep saying that. Not long enough.
I just thought this was fabulous. I've read other Victor Hugo before, but like I say, this was the first time reading this. And I'd never seen the film. I'd never been to the musical, so I really came at it completely fresh. And I loved it. I thought Cosette was a bit wet, to be.
Yeah. Okay, you've frozen there a bit, so hopefully that will clear up. Okay, I think you're back.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're back. You're moving again.
I absolutely loved Fantine and Jean Valjean. I just thought it was great. It had everything. It had adventure, and it had tragedy, and it had romance, and it had romps through the city, under the city. It was just great. I loved it. Have you read it?
Yeah, a few times. 5 times, and my aim is to read every translation. I've read 3 translations at this point. In April, I'm going backwards now. I'm going to read the previous translation to that one by Julia Rose, I think it is. So every April now, I'm going to be reading a translation, a complete translation, I should say, not abridged, but more or less complete of all of them. And I've got all the translations except the bootleg sort of one or pirated one that was done in the Civil War, the American Civil War period.
Yeah. This is the Christine Donaher.
Yeah. It's really good because I've read the original translation by Charles Wilbur that was done in 1862. He was the first English edition, American edition. He was an archaeologist. I think did some Egyptology. It's pretty stodgy, his translation. And then I read, I always forget his name. He did it first, I think, for the Folio Society, and then it's the older Penguin edition.
Oh yeah,
I read that twice, and I read the Charles Wilbur twice. I read that once. I started reading it a second time, but I read the Christine Donaher translation twice, and it's my favorite so far.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I don't have anything to compare it to, but I thought the translation was really good.
Yeah, and like there's scenes like at Waterloo where the the English are saying, you're surrounded, give up, and the mythical story is the guy screams out mad, and it's usually been translated before at times by Isabel Hopgood as he screamed out excrement. Doesn't quite work. And even because, and then I love with the scene where not the scene, but somebody else sort of wrote it sort of for the cinema in a book called the book of the century, and he says, he should say you, and it's like, yeah, that gets the sense across in English.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's interesting though, isn't it? What a difference a translator can make. Well, we've been reading as part of a group we call the Pinheiro Project, all the books that have been translated into English by the Argentinian author Claudia Pinheiro. And she had one translator for the earlier books that she did, and then she changed translators. And the difference is just remarkable. It's so much more articulate. And we have actually got a couple of native Spanish readers within the group. And they say as well that the translation is much more accurate. So translators make such an enormous difference.
Yeah. And that's why I'm going to be doing the Julia Rose one that was previous to this, because I remember when this came out, and I've said this several times, I think, on different videos, but they were saying, oh, finally a female translator for Les Misérables. And I'm going, wait a minute, there's been 3 male translators and there's been 3 female translators.
Yeah.
That's pretty even.
Yeah.
But Pat says, yay, Les Misérables.
She was part of the reading group that I read it with.
Yeah. Well, did you do it with the Classics and Co., or Aaron Facer started one separate, and that's when I jumped in on?
Yes. I think it was with Aaron, because we'd read Waugh as well, and then we read this. But it wasn't with the Classics and Co.
Yeah. So I was there. I was there occasionally, poking up my head.
Well, you're in most of the things that I read anyway. You're in most of the groups.
Well, you've twisted my arm to maybe start a Dickens one, a chronological Dickens. That's only like I got everything lined up here, and there's like 20 volumes. That won't take too long, will it?
No, couple of years, it'll be fine.
Yeah. What did you think? Because, like you said, Cosette was a bit of a wet rag. I think that's what you were saying. Yeah. Now, a lot of people pull out the love story between her and Marius as they really love that. What did you think of that? The love story.
That was the possibly one of the least favorite themes for me. Yeah. Like I say, I didn't really gel with Cosette, and
while she was a child, it was great, I thought.
And then she went progressively downhill.
Yeah.
And her mother was so feisty, and you think, where did all that go? All that passion, where did that go? It obviously hasn't passed itself on to you. But yeah, and Marius as well. He started off okay.
Yeah.
But then he began to annoy me. So yeah, I think the romance between the two of them was my least favorite.
Yeah. Well, I love Marius's grandfather.
Yeah. I loved him too.
Like 90-some years old. Yeah, 90-some years old, and just as feisty and full of piss and vinegar as anything, I guess you would say.
I love the old people. I want to grow into one.
Well, the thing that I found funny was he talked about Madame Thénardier's fixation with reading, horrible romances and everything like this.
Yeah.
And then he writes this romance between Marius and Cosette, which I thought was very sappy. And I'm going, if hers are worse, God Almighty, what are they like? You know, or was he just? I don't know what he was doing. I really don't know whether he was trying to say something there, or because the next question, the question here is, what are the other books that you have read by Hugo? And I'm not sure if you've read Notre Dame. Have you read that one?
List for this year, actually.
Yeah.
I'd really like to read that one.
Yeah, you see, there's again, I don't think he can write romance very well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I don't want to spoil that for you, but so what other books have you read by him?
I'm just going through my list here. So I'm trying to think what the first one was. We read one, bear with me. I've got lists going back of what I've read and when, going back years and years and years.
There's Toilers of the Sea. There's what is it? Is it? Oh, I want to say the 13, but it's not. That's Balzac, but it's about the terror. The Man Who Laughs.
So the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
So you have read that?
That I think that was the first one I'd read. It was so long ago. I read some non-fiction that he did as well. I've read some of his, but not many, to be fair. And didn't he do? Was it him that did Cromwell one?
He did. I think he did do something.
Yeah.
I'm not that familiar with everything, even though I love Les Misérables. I should know more about him.
Yeah, he did a play.
Like that's it. A play. Yeah. He did a lot of plays.
Yeah. So that was the other one I'd read. But I would like to get to I'd like to read The Last Day of a Condemned Man.
Yeah, that's really short. That's
yeah.
very short. Yeah.
And The Poor People. Again, that's another short one.
Yeah. Well, I've got a copy because I've read The Condemned Man a long time ago, but it's a completely different translation. So let's arrange sometime to read that. Because that is short. And in December, if I don't know if Mark at Book Time with Elvis is watching, or even if he still wants to do it, we were going to read Toilers of the Sea in December.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I've got them. I'm absolutely addicted to Delphi classics. So I've got a complete works of Victor Hugo from them. I think they do them reasonably well.
So they're all going to be older translations, obviously. And Les Misérables, and there's either going to be Charles Wilbur's or Isabel Hopgood's translation, one or the other. I don't know which one's in there.
But yeah, that's a good idea. Good idea. So this one I chose for big stonking historical classic.
That was one of my choices, but I chose all the other translations as well because it's still one book.
It is. That's clever.
I took all of the translations.
And you moaned at Gavin last week for cheating.
Well, that's why I allowed him to do that, because it's breaking. See, adding a different book is cheating, but adding a different version and a translation, is that cheating? Now that's debatable.
That is debatable. Yeah.
Okay, so I could continue to talk about Les Misérables forever, but we will probably lose some viewers. So let's move on to another book.
Okay, well, you're going to get my cheat book this time then. This is my cheat book. Life at Blandings by P.G. Wodehouse. Life at Blandings isn't actually a book. It's 3 books. So
yeah, but it's put together.
This is only 1 book, look.
Exactly.
But it's the 3 volumes of the Blandings series by P.G. Wodehouse. I always mention Jeeves and Wooster, so I thought I'd have a bit of a change and we'd go with that instead. I absolutely love P.G. Wodehouse's work. And also we share a birthday. Not the same year, I will. But
that was 1888, I think it was. 1888. He actually didn't he share his birthday with, somebody's gonna have to check that if they're by their computer, with Hitler. I think he's actually shared a birthday with, I think his birthday was with Hitler. But wow. I could be wrong.
I didn't realize that. If that's true, I didn't realize that. But I certainly share a birthday with P.G. Wodehouse. And also Mario Puzo was born on the same day, and Ed McBain was born on the same day. But anyway, Blandings. Blandings is the home of Lord Emsworth, who his prized possession is a pig called the Empress of Blandings.
A Berkshire sow.
Yes. People are often trying to make off with his pig, or at least he thinks they're trying to make off with his pig. It's a wonderful cast of characters, just like Jeeves and Wooster is. The family name is Threpwood, I think, and his son Freddie Threpwood is a little bit brainless and always getting himself into some sort of trouble from which he has to be bailed.
Like Wooster, like Bertie Wooster, very much like Bertie Wooster. And what's the name of the butler? Because the butler sort of is Jeeves like in some ways too. Oh
yes, he is. Name.
Is it Merriweather? Oh, I can't remember now. It's a long time since I read Blandings.
It's a long time since I've read them as well, but I love them. I think it might be.
Or Marigold. No. So I'm sure it starts with M.
I'm just trying to find it. But they live at Blandings Castle. They're just funny. You know, these are, I love the way they encapsulate that age as well.
Yeah.
And just take the mickey out of it. Basically, it's, where is it?
Well, it's very sort of, when he got into his groove, I think he got very into the 20s thing. And even when he was writing his books, like the Jeeves and Woosters or the Blandings in the 60s and 70s, they're still in the, like, there are things that are happening in the world that it's in the 60s, but it doesn't, it's anachronistic. They're really in the 20s, but in the 60s.
Yeah. Merridew.
Okay, yes, yeah. That was close. I knew it was M.
Yeah, yeah. But he always comes up with great names for his characters as well. I mean, the first one features Mrs. Twemlow, and not Tremlow, Twemlow, and it just sounds as though you're mispronouncing it.
Yeah,
and you can't
well,
your ass properly.
I think one of Wooster's friends is. I think he might show up there too. Is Barmy Fumby? Oh, geez, I can't even do it. I did it in my head. Barmy Fungi Fibs, or something like that.
Yeah, and you got Gussie Finknottle.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. And is it the Newt fancier? Gussie the Newt fan.
I mean, I do actually prefer Jeeves and Wooster, although I like Smythe as well. Or Smith.
Yeah.
Smith. But I love this. Have you ever seen the television adaptation of this with Timothy Spall?
Yeah,
Emsworth. And what is her name?
Yeah, I can't remember who else is on there.
Jennifer was in it.
Sorry?
Jennifer Saunders was in it as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She was the sister, I guess. Yeah, I think.
Yeah.
Is it? Sorry?
That was the sister, wasn't it? Keeble? Constance, that's it. Constance Keeble.
Yeah. And then there's what is it? Freddie. Freddie, is it Freddie that he's got his own stories? He's sort of the cousin or the uncle or something.
Freddie.
I can't remember. Or another brother.
Is he the son?
Well, there's Freddie. There is the son, but no, there's another one that's an older fart. He's an old fart, and he goes on his own little journeys in London and so forth.
Yeah, they're just all very funny. They're just caricatures of the rich and the fabulous during that era. I love them. They're really nostalgic, and they just conjure up merry old England in the interwar years.
Yeah, I've got a little cabinet that has all the Everyman Woodhouse. Like they reprinted them all in nice hardcovers, and I've got them all. And it's sort of been barricaded even in my kitchen here, but I dug it out, and because I read one for my Patreon book club, and it's years since I read them. And I thought, because you could sit down and read these in an afternoon, they just melt, So I thought I'll try to read one of these every Sunday, and it'll take me about 2 years to get through every one, and then I'll start over. Because the plots are so similar that, by the time you're done, you'll forget the machinations of the one,
Absolutely.
And so I want to do that, and especially get I don't know what order yet. I haven't figured that out. So I'm going to, once I get it cleared up in there and I can open up the cabinet and order the things. I want to do them sort of chronological, but obviously I don't want to mix up the Blandings. I don't want to mix up Jeeves and Wooster. Some of the ones like the oldest member stories, which are really great, they're fine, being mixed up. But those, they're not. And there's certain things that I want. I've been looking for it. I want to get, those little, you can buy these they're hard plastic things of animals, the children have. I want a black Berkshire sow. I want a little one to put on the thing, and I want a silver cow creamer. And you'll know that's
That's my absolute favorite Jeeves and Wooster. I love that. Go and steal the cow creamer back.
Yeah. Well, we better say what books are in there. I'm pretty sure there's Heavy Weather in that omnibus you got, Something Fresh, and the first one, I think.
Summer Lightning.
Summer Lightning. Okay.
Yeah. Something Fresh, Summer Lightning, Heavy Weather.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did you like the TV series?
Bits of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like Timothy Spall.
Yes.
But yeah, it was a bit hit and miss. It wasn't the same as the adaptation of Jeeves and Wooster with Hugh Laurie and Stephen Fry, which was just glorious. And every time I read one of those books, I hear their voices in my head. No, because that was just a fabulous series. It definitely wasn't as good as that.
There was a film that was done, I think, for TV with Peter O'Toole as Lord Emsworth. I think it was called Heavy Weather. That was he played a doddering sort of, maybe a little too much doddering, but I thought it was a good one. I thought it was a good movie.
I'll see if I can find that, because I like Peter O'Toole.
Yeah, no, that was good. And yeah, that's the thing. It's like for me to go on a desert island, if I could bind up all 100 or 90 some books that he wrote, and it'd be one book.
Yeah, that would be fabulous, wouldn't it? I mean, I like the Dr. Sally ones as well. He does a lot of golf, doesn't he? Dr. Sally's very good. He was a big golf fan. But I've got I have an Audible subscription. I don't know why, because I don't listen to Audible books that often. But one of the things I did get was a Stephen Fry narration of several of the Jeeves and Wooster books, and that's great. I mean, Stephen Fry is a really good narrator anyway, but especially with Jeeves and Wooster, I think he's brilliant.
Hugh Laurie has done a few as well, I think. I've heard. Yeah, he's done a few. I don't know where they're available, but I'm sure he's done some. Martin Jarvis is another one that's good, and then all the radio ones that were good. Richard Bryars did Bertie Wooster, and I forget who Jeeves was. It was one of the old Richard. Was it not Ian Richardson, but his brother? Was it Ralph Richardson? Maybe. I'm not sure. But they're really good. And then even what's the new guy? They did some. They were pretty good. It was the guy who did the radio series Giles Wembley Hogg. What's his name?
Don't know.
But anyway, there were some new ones. Michael Horden. Yes, thanks, Mick. Yes, it was Michael Horden. Yeah, but they're really good. They're really good.
Yeah.
And as I say, I'm going to start reading. I'm going to start reading on Sundays at some point. A Jeeves and Wooster. I mean, a P.G. Wodehouse, and just go through them. And because I love these Everyman editions they did, and they're just absolutely marvelous. So
I'm collecting old Penguin Classics ones whenever I see them. So my husband, was it last year? I think he bought me 8 or 10 that he'd found in various places. The old orange Penguin ones.
Yeah, there's the ones with Iconicus, I think it is, art on it that I really like to get, but they didn't do them all. He didn't.
Right.
He did about 40 or is it either 30 some or 60 some? I'm not sure, but he didn't quite do the whole series of P.G. Wodehouse. But I'd still like to get them. They're really nice. They're really nice covers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the thing is, I see some penguins up above you there, but I don't know if are those Woodhouse.
No, the Woodhouse ones are down there because W's at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
But a lot of these, my uncle had an elderly neighbour, lovely woman, and she gave me a complete set of leather-bound works of Charles Dickens, that she'd had when she was younger. And she was a Belgian lady, and she died not last year, but the year before, and had no children, but I think there were a couple of nieces and nephews. And my uncle and aunt were helping them sort out the house and found probably about 150 old Penguin classics boxed up in the garage, waiting to go to the tip.
Oh, gee.
So they stole them and they gave them to me. But Albertine would have been absolutely mortified that these books were just going to be thrown away, because she absolutely loved reading. But that's where a lot of my older Penguin classics came from.
Oh, that's good. They're
Rescued from the dump. Yes.
Gareth is here. He's missed a little bit. Well, we just finished the second book, so there's still lots to go.
Yeah, we're not doing very well at speediness.
No. So let's go for number 3 and see what we got here.
What should we have for number 3? Oh, let's have some non-fiction. I love travel writing. I really like the work of Colin Thubron. And this one, Shadow of the Silk Road, I picked because I have a long-standing desire to travel the Silk Road. Colin Thubron does a really good job of combining history, culture, religion, the arts, and what he's seeing as he travels. And I just think he's a brilliant writer. I've read several of his, but yeah, this is one of my favourites because it's a journey that I would love to do myself.
Yeah, I've not read that one. I have read books about the Silk Road, and obviously that goes right back to, you might as well say, Marco Polo's, journeys.
Yeah.
But is that a straight up history? Because I'm familiar with the author, but not that book. Is it a straight up history of it, or is he traveling it and talking about how it is now and how it was?
It's very much a combination of history and comparing the sort of then and now. But he adds in local legends. He adds in stories of people he's met. He adds in a bit about the different ethnic groups along the way. It's a real combination of arts, history, religion, geography, sociology, anthropology, and he sort of mashes them all together, which is what I like about him. And in this one, he went from Xi'an in China. Is that how you pronounce it? It's Xian.
Oh, don't ask me.
No, he goes through. He goes around the top of Tibet, and then he goes to Turkmenistan and through Iran, and there's a nice map here. Look, you can see it. And he goes all the way to Syria. He comes out of the Mediterranean, Syria. Right. But it's just absolutely fascinating. Yeah, and he just writes beautifully. I really like his style of writing.
When was it published?
This one was first published 2007. So he was, I don't know how old he is. I think he was getting on a bit by this stage. Because he's not a spring chicken anymore.
Does he have a nice bibliography in the back, or does he dwell on a lot of original sources? Well, I'm sure he must.
He's got a timeline, but no real bibliography. It's an index. There's a very comprehensive index, but he doesn't have a bibliography that goes alongside it.
He probably incorporates it into some notes, maybe, or does he have?
Yeah, notes? I don't think he tends to do that in any of his books. Yeah, he was born in 1939, so he was. When did I say it was published? 2006. So he's in his 60s by then. He's in his mid-60s by then. Let me check some of his others. Hold on.
While you do that, I'll just pop up a comment here. Dave, yeah, Ionicus. I knew I was mixing that up, but he did the covers for several R. Chetwood Hayes hardcovers too. Yeah, that I wasn't aware. Lovely. I can't remember. It's a pseudonym for an artist. I don't know if he used Ionicus across the board or for a certain style. You probably know better, Dave. But I just love the P.G. Wodehouse covers that he did for Penguin.
Yeah, he doesn't tend to have a bibliography in any of his books, actually.
Oh, okay. That's a bit of a downer.
Yeah.
Not have. Well, I guess if you don't want to read anything more on the subject, that's good, because that's what I always hate is when somebody's got a really good bibliography and you make it. Wow, that's a few of them. So what are some of the subjects or titles up there? Are they all travel?
These are all travel books, yeah. So in Siberia, behind the wall, the Amur River, among the Russians, journey into Cyprus, Jerusalem, to a mountain in Tibet. This one's actually a novel, I think. Yeah, this is a novel. I've not read this one. I've read more of his straight travel writing. But I was in a second-hand bookshop and I saw it, so I had to pick it up because it said Colin Thubron on it.
Well, those are perfect for upcoming Spring into Adventure.
Aren't they just? However, they're not women. I'm flying the flag for the women during Spring into Adventure. Right.
Yeah, I've got two. I got 2 volumes of geez, what's her name? Of her letters. You're doing the biography, Gertrude Bell. Yes, thank you. I've got 2 volumes of letters, but they were edited by her mother, and so there's a lot of stuff. There's problems there, and whether or not I don't even know if all her letters are still exist anymore, because her mother might have got rid of some that she didn't think were appropriate.
Yeah. That's.
Oh, and you mentioned, I'm getting off topic here, but you mentioned Freya Stark as well, which I thought was really cool, because that's her travel and her photography is just fabulous. It is 20th century, but it's great.
I've got a couple of Freya Stark books up there, so I might stick a couple of those in as well. But I really the Queen of the Desert, which is the Gertrude Bell one, and also High Albania, which I've actually read before, by Edith Durham. But that's brilliant. I love Albania. And I've got a Women Travellers one as well. So yeah, I'm flying the women's flag during Spring into Adventure, just to show you that women can have adventures too.
No, that's definitely true, because there's a lot of it going right back to, again, the names, but Baker was a traveler in Africa, and he found his wife. She was he bought his wife from a sultan. She was a European, and she wound up, traveling with him throughout Africa.
Wow.
And there's her diaries, but not too much of it has been published. And there's been a lot of female travelers, but a lot of their stuff hasn't been written up, especially in Africa. It's just, for some reason, they're just sitting there, and little bits and pieces have been done. Got a few before we move on to the next book. Dave says, "Hi Gareth, I completed my collection of your albums last night, and we're going to have you're going to have to get out a new one out." And Gareth says, "Thanks so much. New album will be out in the summer." So, we haven't got to the music yet. We need to get through the books.
Oh, yes.
So number 4, I guess. Yeah. So we're nearing halfway for the books.
A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr. The tiniest little book. One I read last year, but it's beautiful. It's the sort of book that I think I will probably read every year. Have you read it?
Yes, I've read it twice. When I first read it was in the early 80s, and I didn't like it. And then I read it again. Then I read it in the 90s and loved it.
Yeah, weird, isn't it? This is about a guy called Tom Birkin, who has been injured during the First World War. He has physical injuries, but they're more nervous injuries. So he has a tic. He has PTSD, although it's not called that in this book. We are in we're not actually. It starts off, he's an old man, and he's reflecting on a summer he spent in 1920, where he was still suffering from the effects of the First World War. And he travels to a town, what's it called? Oxgodby. Great names, aren't they?
Yeah.
In the north of the country, he has a commission to uncover a mural in a church, and he's an art restorer. He goes there as a broken man, and it's just such a gentle book, and it's about the relationships that he develops with the villagers there, and the vicar and the vicar's wife, and a guy called Moon, who was also in the First World War. He's an archaeologist, and he is searching for a grave. The sort of village matriarch has died, and she's left some money that will go to the community, the church and the community, on condition that this mural is uncovered and that this grave is found. And she wants the world to know why this person, an ancestor of hers, was buried outside the churchyard. And Moon is the archaeologist who's doing that. But it's also, there's an awful lot of countryside in here. And we are still at a time where villages like that are quite remote. And they're not particularly industrialized. They're sort of stuck in a bit of a time warp. And it's just lovely. Absolutely delightful book. I came across it completely by accident. And I read it and thought it was beautiful. I've since found one other J.L. Carr book, which I've got as an ebook. And I also found another one in the wild. So I read the ebook relatively recently, and it's what is it called? It's called How, I can't even say the name, Slinglesbury something Wanderers won the FA Cup. And it's about this small village football team that obviously goes on to win the FA Cup, and it's brilliant. It's really quite good fun. It's funny. It's funnier. This isn't funny, but the football one is. And then I've got another one which I found in a second-hand bookshop and haven't read yet, called The Harpole Report.
I've seen that one. Yes, I've seen that one.
Frank Muir, who I had a huge amount of respect for, he was a very funny man, says this is the funniest and perhaps the truest story about running a school that I've ever read. But like I say, I haven't read it. But it looks quite good. And it's quite short. Maybe I'll stick it on the end of my Read What You Own list.
I hold on to it because I would like to. I do have a copy of A Month in the Country, and I'd like to reread it, especially now since you've, when I saw it on your list. And I don't know that one. I've seen it because I recognize the cover. So I probably want to read that. So hold on to that for a little while.
I'm not getting it. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I like I said, for some reason I read when I first read it, I was quite young. I wasn't even 20, I guess, when I first read that, because I think it was written in the late 70s? I think it was.
Yes.
The Month of the Country.
Yeah. Was it mid 70s? 70? Oh, this was first published in 1980. So yeah, you're right. It was written in the late, first published in 1980.
Yeah, so I read it maybe within 5 years it was out. And yeah, it didn't work for me. But then when I reread it again in the 90s, it really clicked. And it just didn't seem like it was something that was written in the 80s about the 20s for some reason. It seems it's I don't know how old the author is, but it seems like he actually lived through the period, or he made it seem really, really real. And it's so short.
Yeah.
And it's so short, but it doesn't seem like it's that short either.
It really packed a much bigger punch than the site would indicate.
Yeah.
But he didn't start writing until he retired. He was a teacher. which is possibly why people think that's
okay.
quite. But also he published little booklets and pamphlets and maps and things like that. He didn't start writing until the late 1960s.
So maybe he did live. How old? Yeah, maybe he did live. But I didn't think. I thought he wasn't that old when he wrote that. But I know nothing about him.
Born in 1912.
So yeah, he'll remember the 20s, definitely, sort of, but from through a child's eyes, which could be really good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I definitely have to reread that again.
It's brilliant. Great little book.
Dave here is going back to Ionicus, the artist on the Wodehouse. Is Joshua Charles Armitage? Yes, 26 September 1913 to January 1998. It was an English illustrator under the pen name Ionicus. Yeah, I love those. Really love those.
Let's just grab. These are the older ones.
Yeah. No, there'll be a full colored picture on it of his.
So he didn't do the illustrations for the black and white line drawings then.
I know he did the covers. I don't know if he did the interiors, but they're colored ones. Those are too old. I don't know who the artists are though.
Jeffrey Salter.
Okay, yeah. Those are cool too. That's the problem. There's so many that are nice ones, but it's the later ones I think done in the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
If you just show the covers, I can quickly let you know. No, that's not him.
I've got some other ones like that.
No, I don't think. No, that's not him. It doesn't. They're very Art Deco-y. They to me they look Art Deco.
Oh, okay. God, this one looks like it's been dropped in a bath.
That could be him. That could be him.
Let's have a look and see what it says. Doesn't actually say inside, which is very rude.
He does sign every one on the cover, so it will say Ionicus somewhere in there. The bottom.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That one is also Ionicus.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah. But then we've got older ones like this.
Yeah, those I like too. That's the thing. I really like that.
Yeah.
It's like there's so many, but I've already got nice copies, and I've held back of buying because I was buying in Canada. I was buying the Herbert Jenkins, like the original publications. Like,
right.
Occasionally it'd be nice to get a first printing, and it was really nice to get it with a jacket. But I just loved the black drawings on the hardcovers, and I was buying them that way. And then all of a sudden I come here, and then they're doing the everybody. Yeah,
that's an Ionicus.
Yeah,
that's an Ionicus. And then these two are Jeffrey Salter again.
Yeah, they're marvelous as well. They're just they're marvelous. Sadra saying, "Hi everyone, these lives are precious." Thank you. And Dave is going on the basis of that. Would recommend Sussex Tales by Jan Edwards, which is just tales of life in real farming community, and it's great. I don't know that.
Sounds. No, I don't either. Where's my pen? Hold on, I've got to balance these books. I keep pulling books out of my bookshelf.
Yeah, I'll let you write it down, then I'll get it from you because I don't have a pen here. I didn't bring my pen.
The whole bookshelves are going to collapse if I'm not careful here. Right. Sussex Tales by Jan Edwards.
Yeah. That's good.
Does sound good. Have you read any Laurie Lee?
I haven't. No. I never heard of him until I came to the UK. And
No
I
one's
don't
ever
know.
UK.
Sorry?
No one's ever heard of him unless you're from the UK.
Okay. But I hear people do like him, and I'm interested.
Very gentle, again, very pastoral, elements of fiction and non-fiction. He's most famous for a book called Cider with Rosie, which tells of his childhood in Gloucestershire. But then he's done other things as well, like essays or short novellas. There's one, As I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning. What else have we got there? I Can't Stay Long. As I Walked Out One Midsummer Morning, he's touring through Spain after the Spanish Civil War.
Oh, okay.
There's another book of essays he's done that, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called, and I don't know why it's not up there. But it's a story about. Do you know? There was a disaster in Wales called the Aberfan disaster, where a slag heap, so the waste from a coal mine, which is just sort of piled up and piled up and piled up, slid down the mountain and completely covered a primary school and killed lots of children. I mean, basically, a large percentage of primary school aged children in that village died. And he went and visited Aberfan a year on from the event. But he just writes so beautifully and really gets a lot of atmosphere in his writing. But there's nothing dynamic about them. These are not fast-paced, go-getting books. They're gentle and they're thoughtful, and extremely eloquent. And J.L. Carr reminds me of Laurie Lee.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I like I say, I've wanted. Well, not wanted. Like it's always been in there. Once I heard about Laura Lee, that I want to read, like Cider with Rosie. Did not know that he wrote essays, and that definitely grabs me as well. So that's another author to add on to new authors for me.
Yeah.
So that'll be cool. Okay. On to the next book.
Okay, let's go for the most modern one. This is Lanny by Max Porter. And this is experimental modern fiction, I would say. It's about a village, and it's about a young lad who, it sounds like he's on the spectrum, has neurodivergent tendencies, but it's wrapped up in a folk tale. And you have this entity called Dead Papa Toothwort, who is an ancient being, and listens to all the villagers, and you get the impression he's a tree. No one can see him, but he moves around and he gathers up all the rubbish, and he's wandering around the village that Lanny, the young lad, lives in. And Lanny lives there with his parents. He's a bit of a dreamer. And dead Papa Toothwort decides that he's taken quite a fancy to him. What I like about this book is that A, it's like nothing I've ever read before, and B, is the experimental text. So when dead Papa Toothwort is listening in on other people's conversations, this is how the text is.
Oh, okay.
And it's indicative of hearing lots of voices at the same time and them all overlapping, I suppose. Dead Papa Toothwort comes in every so often, but the very small, they're not even chapters, they're almost like pages, are written by different voices. So you have Lanny's mum speaking for a page, and then you have Lanny's dad speaking for a page. You have a guy who is an artist who starts teaching Lanny how to draw, and then Lanny goes missing. And Lanny goes missing because dead Papa Toothwort is interested in him. But the villagers do what villagers do, and they all start casting aspersions here, there and everywhere. So it could have been Lanny's mum that has done something to him, or his dad, or the guy who's teaching him art, and it's just really original. And I say, like nothing else I've read before, really. It's a mixture of a crime novel and folk history merged together with experimental styling. Max Porter is chair of the judges for this year's Booker Prize, and the other book I've read by him was equally as experimental. It's called Grief is a Thing with Feathers. Apparently he's got another one coming out as well, but this is great. So this, like I say, I tried to go for things that were very different. Each book, there are two, you will see there are two in here that are similar, but I tried to go for things that is different. And this is the modern experimental fiction. I don't read very much experimental fiction. I don't tend to like it, mainly because I like punctuation. I don't enjoy things that don't have punctuation. This does have punctuation, but it does have a weird layout.
Yeah, when I went down your list, I never heard of that. So I looked it up and I realized it was new. So that's as far as I went, because I figured, okay, I'll let you explain it because I know nothing about it. And once you started saying experimental, it was like, but it's short. It's short. So that's okay. I will never pick up another book that is called experimental that is like 1,000 pages. No, there's just no way. Unless I've read something like this short one by an author and I like the way they do it, and then I could build up to that. But no. But that sounds interesting, though. I do admit it does sound interesting.
It's interesting. Grief is the Thing with Feathers isn't nearly as experimental, but I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Couldn't wait to read this. It's in two parts. And in the first part, like I say, you get the swirly bits where dead Papa Toothwort is listening to all the villagers speaking, but then you get named bits as well, and the narrator's voice is that person. But then in the second part, you don't get any names, and you pretty much have to guess who's talking. It's not all merged together, so it is separated off. but when they're speaking, it has these little that indicates change of speaker, but
Right.
it doesn't tell you who that speaker is. So and the pace gets faster and faster as you're jumping from each of these different voices to and from. It's just really interesting.
It does, like I say, because it sounds interesting, but again, if it was 1,000 pages, then it doesn't sound that interesting. But that can't be more than 300 pages, or barely 300 and some pages, I would have thought.
It's not even that, just over 200, 215.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's perfect for trying something experimentally. That's
Exactly.
that's fine.
Yeah. I don't mind trying things. But I want a taster. I don't want a meal that's going to last a week.
Yeah.
That's. I read Thomas Pynchon, Blame Allen at Big Hard Books and Classics. We read Against the Day, beginning of the year. Wow, that was a weird book.
Yeah, I have no interest in reading him.
Still don't know what the story was with that. But yeah, that's actually worth a try. For modern experimental fiction, it's not too out there. As far as I'm concerned, it fits my reading because I like punctuation and capital letters, and it has them. But also it's interesting. It's a really interesting merge of two genres.
It definitely sounds interesting. Dave is saying there, I think it was back to when you had all the penguins there. It's a whole new concept of balancing the books.
You wait till this bookshelf falls on my head because I've taken out everything at the bottom.
So yeah, I there's nothing much more for me to say about this book because I don't know it, but at least we got through that one quickly.
Yeah.
But it sounds interesting, so we can go. What are we on? Are we on the 5th or 6th? We should be on the 6th one now, right?
3, 4, 5. This is the 6th one.
6th one. Okay, yeah.
John Wyndham, The Chrysalids. I love a bit of John Wyndham. This is my favourite one. I've read quite a few. I think this was one of the first ones I ever read. My dad was heavily into science fiction. There were a lot of science fiction books on the shelves when I was a kid. So he encouraged me to read things like Chucky, which definitely isn't a children's book. If you've read it, it looks like it should be, but it's definitely not. But this one I think is marvelous. This is about a future society where we've sort of gone back to quite puritanical views. Anyone who is different, anything that is different is very seriously frowned upon. People with any sort of disformity or disability are thrust out out of the villages, and they're called deviations or abominations, and they're basically banished. Animals that don't fit the prescribed description of how they would be are destroyed. Crops are destroyed. People are banished. And then you have this group of children who are telepathic, and they communicate very gently between each other, and they manage to survive a number of years because obviously this is a difference that you can't see. They manage to keep themselves hidden. A couple of adults do actually know or suspect, but then one of them his parents has a daughter, and she is incredibly talented. She has a vast range for her telepathy, and she causes all sorts of problems because she's so young she can't control it. And so she will do things like shriek in her mind, and all the others will come running because they can't block the noise of her from their heads. But then, of course, all the other villagers are wondering why they were all seen running in one direction to this farm. And so there is danger that they will be discovered. And it's about them and their journey. And it's also about the difference between physical disabilities and the invisible, hidden differences to the norm. But I just think it's brilliant, and I could read this book over and over again.
Yeah, it's I first well, that's the first Wyndham that I had ever heard about, and it was read to me. It was read in the classroom. The teacher read this to us, and I must have been 12, maybe, I guess 12, 11, 12, I think it was. And it was, I loved it. And that was my introduction to John Wyndham. And since then, after reading a lot of other science fiction and British science fiction, American fiction, it's very British science fiction because it's got this feel of British science fiction that you just don't get. You've got, you know, the dystopian, or I call this, I guess, more post-apocalyptic / dystopian, but it's different than American those versions, and he was very different. You just look at his other ones, you know, like Day of the Triffids and all the other, you know. And it's just, and as Gareth says, you know, Wyndham Whoop, he was good, like all his incarnations as well. Like when he was writing under John Benyon Harris, or just John Harris, because it's like, what has he got? 6 names? Like it's like John Benyon, Wyndham, blah 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 Harris.
It doesn't actually say this in this one, but all of the pen names that he used seem to be some sort of derivation or combination of the multiple names he really had.
And it's just, his stuff is wonderful, and I've been wanting to. Gareth is reading through stuff, and I've been it's one of my many projects of getting everything of certain writers and just systematically reading through them. And he's one of those that I know I have no problem doing. There's a few others that I want to test a book or two again, like reread and see if I want to do that. But there's no question that I definitely want to read through.
I like it. Well, although I think, prefer the novels. I love the Midwich Cuckoos.
See, that's very British as well. Like that's extremely
very
British.
Absolutely. Day of the Triffids is great. What else have I read? There's one where, The Secret People, that's what it's called. He discovers an underground society. But equally, I like the short stories as well. I read Jizzle last year. Consider Her Ways. I've got a fair few. There's still a few that I haven't read that I would like to get to.
I think there's still a few that have never been published in book form that are still sort of lingering. I think there are still some that are lingering in journals, not journals, but magazines that he wrote for, and they just have not been put into book form. There was I'm not sure if it was Centipede Press. Somebody did a recent collection, and I think there was one or two in there that were new, that were never published before in
Wow.
book. Yeah, so there's still stuff out there of his
Yeah.
that are hard to find.
Yeah.
Uh, Dave, another recommendation here. I can recommend a book that is fairly experimental, which is pretty safe because you have little chance of finding a copy. The Orphan Palace by the late Joseph Pulver Sr. That sounds very familiar for some reason.
Oh, okay. Let's write that one down too.
Maybe you've mentioned this before to me, Dave, because that sounds very, I don't know anything about it, but it's the title and the author's name is clicking something, and I can't figure out what. I'll have to mull on that, and probably at 3 a.m. I'll wake up and go, oh, yes, that's where I heard it. No, Wyndham, you can't go wrong with Wyndham if you like science fiction, you like, again, like it's like, it's not fast paced. There's not huge things happening. It's character driven with a plot, but it's it goes along with things. And there's I would think Day of the Triffids is his most exciting one that I could think of from
Yeah.
memory.
Probably, yeah. I haven't read one I don't like. I like some to a greater degree. Like I say, The Chris is my favourite. But I haven't read one that I didn't like yet.
Yeah. No, it's the same as me. And I haven't read everything. I think I've read all the novels. But I know I haven't read all the short stories. I know that for a fact. Yeah. Especially when there's ones, if there are still any, that are lingering in magazines still. That's the hard thing. So, hi Deb, it's amazing stopping by to say hello. Unfortunately, I can't stay.
Hi, MJ.
And bye, MJ. Hi
Bye.
and bye. Amy's here. Hi, Shawn and Debs.
Hiya.
We were just talking about essays of the Laura. Is it Laura Lee?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I didn't know he did.
Yeah, they're good. They're worth a read.
Gavin saying, not Gavin, jeez. Gareth saying, I think he's better at novels than short story, but he's one of the best. Yeah, that's my impression of memory. And I think you would say that too, Debs. He's better, yeah. But it's weird that some people are better at short stories than novels. It's just, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, it's that underlying feeling of paranoia that you get in old British SF, from Wyndham to Quatermass. Oh yeah, the Quatermass stuff is
fabulous. I love those old. Well, I mean, they're not really old, are they? We're not going back to the beginnings of British sci-fi writers, but yeah, that is a great era for British sci-fi writers. You do get this impending sense of doom.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. The Quatermass stuff is, it's just he does just reuse old sort of themes of science fiction, but he puts them in the sort of the Cold War sort of paranoia period, and those serials are fabulous, and then the Hammer films are just as good, well, most of them. Yeah, there's a couple, the ones with what's the American actor, they're good, but they lose something because I think he's in there. You know,
Yeah.
I can't think of his name. I can't think of the actor's name. Oh, yeah, I can't think of the name.
I've
But yeah,
probably
no,
told you, my dad was a rocket scientist and worked for the European Space Programme out in Woomera in Australia. So we had a lot of sci-fi stuff on our bookshelves because that's what he loved, you know.
well,
So
that's where Journey into Space, the radio series in the city, that's where they took off from to go to the
absolutely.
moon, and then Mars
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another great radio, British radio science fiction. And again, there's marked differences from American science fiction as well. It's just they developed sort of side by side, but they diverged in so many ways. Just think of John Christopher's, The Death of Grass.
Yeah.
But for American ones, you've got some fabulous ones. The Last Babylon. You've got Earth Abides. Fabulous ones, but very different. Very different.
Yeah.
But equally as good.
Yeah.
There's a very different tone in the writing of John Christopher. Yeah, there is, but they're very British in their own way. Like, John Christopher's Death of Grass is maybe leaning towards more the American style of sort of post-apocalyptic stuff because of the use of guns. I think that's the one main thing. But it's still very British. And then you got Earth Abides by what's his name, Stewart. I think is leaning a little towards the British, the British style. But that has to be an interesting thing. I agree, a Britishness that's hard to define, but yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah, it's hard to define, but it's definitely there. And you see it in the films too. You see it in the early the British science fiction films. Like we mentioned the Quatermass, but it's in the films as well. It's fairly easy to get on Kindle, The Orphan Palace, but you really need the paperback. I don't think the limitations of Kindle formatting would do. Yeah, that's like thinking of science fiction and Dahlgren. It's the way it's set up on the page. I can't see how they're going to do that in a Kindle because you need these different writings side by side, not like that. They have to be side by side, and it's not going to happen in the Kindle. So yeah, so that's limitations. So print books are better. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, so let's go on to number 7.
Okay, well, I'm sorry, we're going ebook here because I don't have a physical copy. And we're going The Sagas of the Icelanders. I love me a good saga. I really enjoy sagas. I just think that they've got so many elements in them that add up to a cracking story. And I don't care if they've been exaggerated along the years, with the oral retellings. I just like a bit of adventure. I like, and these are, Vikings going marauding. It's a bit like pirates. I like travel. They do a lot of traveling. They have some strong women in these sagas as well. Bit of what would seem like fantasy, bit of mythology, wrap it all up, and I absolutely love it. I was in Reykjavik once, and I was wandering around the Saga Museum, and they've got the most beautifully illustrated copy of the sagas from like the 13th or 14th century, I think. And I had tacked on to the end of a group of American tourists who are being given a guided tour. And this lovely Icelandic host was telling them all about the history of this particular edition of the book, which was just magnificent. And she told them that it was worthless. And they're all looking in confusion. And I'm trying to resist the temptation to go up to her and say, "You mean priceless? You don't mean worthless, you mean priceless."
Okay, yeah.
But these are great. And of course, it's Saga Long next month.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah. But is that the museum? That just reminded me. There's I think it's in the Reykjavik Museum, that there is a pair of pants, trousers, that they've skinned a male, a person, human, and they've tanned it and made them into trousers with all the accoutrements that males have as well.
Yeah, that's not the worst museum in Iceland. They actually have a penis museum where appendages from all sorts of animals are preserved for posterity. And it's been a while since I've been in Iceland, but when I was there last, there was a man, an old farmer somewhere, who had bequeathed in his will to said museum. I don't know whether or not that actually happened, but yeah, weird idea for a museum.
Well, there's been collectors of those kind of things throughout time. Mark at Book Time with Elvis is talking about that like a year or two ago on things, because there was the guy that they found, the Ice Age guy in the Alps, I think it was, a few years ago, and
is it Snorley? Is that what he's called? Is it Snorley? It's something like that, isn't it?
Yeah, but anyway, his genitals were missing, and they figure a collector had stolen them, or one of the people that were there chopped it off and sold it to a collector. Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry.
With visiting the Saga Museum with the beautifully illustrated book, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
The sagas, I like them, but again, I can't read, not again, but I can't read too many in a row, because a lot of them are clearly just the bare bones, I think, of the story made for the person who then will embellish the story.
Absolutely.
So unless you love, the limbs being chopped off every line or stuff like that, it gets a little tiring to me at times, because I want a little more, but I have to put it in perspective. But again, I can't read too many of them in a row, because they just get tiring after a while for me. But I enjoy them a little bit at a time. So
I do. I mean, it is one of those things that is best to dip into in small portions, and just come whenever you like. That's the reasons I like Saga Long, because it takes relatively small bits and said, just do this one. So
I think I might read those, but I'm not going to be sort of part of the Saga Long this year. But I'll probably wind up reading the ones that are there, because they're short. They're very short.
They are very short. Yeah, I mean, I think we're only talking about 80 or 90 pages for the two combined. So yeah, they're very short.
So we got some comments here. Priceless, invaluable. And Amy says, "What a strange museum."
They're very isolated in Iceland. They were isolated for many years.
And Dave's saying the Orphan Palace. Imagine a melding of Raymond Chandler, Lovecraft, and Allen Ginsberg.
Ooh, sounds good.
Well, the Raymond Chandler, Lovecraft. Okay, I'm on board. Allen Ginsberg gets me off board.
I don't mind it in bits.
Like in the northeast of Iran, there's a cemetery called the Penis Cemetery, where the gravestones are in the shape of penis for men. It's one of a kind.
I want to go. I really want to go.
I've never heard of this one, so that's another one to chalk up.
I have to admit that I have a really unfortunate habit of going to places that have got rude and offensive place names and taking a selfie under the road signs. The very first road trip, Phil, my husband, we've been together about 15 years, and we'd been together a few months, and I decided, because I was travel writing at the time, so I blagged a road trip. I wanted to go to all those weirdly named places along the northeast coast of England. So we started at Scarborough and drove down to Skegness. So we're heading off to go to Scarborough, and we get to a road sign and it says Scarborough 12 miles that way, Wetwang 4 miles that way. And we've got to go there. We have got to go there. So we screamed up to Wetwang, stopped by the road sign, took a selfie under the road sign, and then went on our merry way to Scarborough. And now we've been to places like Breaston and Shatton and all sorts of other places. And I collect photographs of us by rude road signs.
What about Cockermouth?
Cockermouth, that's a good one. Cocking, we've been to Cocking.
Okay.
Yeah, we've got a fair collection now because I am actually that juvenile.
As Amy says, sounds like you would appreciate a visit to Dildo, Newfoundland.
A trip there, as long as they've got a road sign. We went to a place. There's a place called Bell End, just outside Birmingham, and we spent ages trying to find a road sign there that said Bell End. But yeah, we've been to places like Butthole, all sorts of places.
Well, there's a lot on the continent, I think, in Europe, but they're spelled, if you pronounce them in English, they're the rude bits, but in their language is not. But who English is gonna pronounce them in the European language? There's no way. It's not gonna happen.
Certainly, if they've got a similar juvenile sense of humor like me. So
okay, so the last book,
final book. Time to bring in a bit of journalism. Evelyn Waugh's Scoop. Now, this, I think, it's relatively similar to P.G. Wodehouse. This is good. This is funny. This is, comedy of errors. But it's based on something that actually happened to Evelyn Waugh. So we have here William Boot, who writes a weekly gardening and nature column for the Daily Beast.
The Daily Mail.
Yes. He is summoned to the office, where he goes in and they mistake him for a relative of his, also named Boot, who is a foreign correspondent, and they promptly dispatch him to a place called Ishmailia in Africa, to cover the unrest that's going on there. And he's completely confused, but he heads out. He's used to writing about dahlias and, you know, hawthorn bushes and things like that, but he heads out to Ishmaelia. This is all about how he gets on. And this is based on Evelyn Waugh being sent by the Daily Mail to Abyssinia to cover the Mussolini's attempt at invading Abyssinia in the Second Italo-Abyssinian War. And Evelyn Waugh actually got a scoop, but he was so worried about sending it back to the Daily Mail, he sent it back in Latin. And I don't know whether they couldn't read it or what, but they just discarded it. He had this, you know, he was the first person to report that Mussolini had invaded Abyssinia again. And they discarded it because he dispatched it to them in Latin. This is based loosely on his reporting in Abyssinia, but it's one of the funniest novels that's been written about journalism. It's just great, and the characters are ridiculous. Apparently Lord Copper is based on a sort of combination of Beaverbrook and Northcliffe. And then you've got the rivalry between the two papers, which the Beast and the Brute, the Daily Brute and the Daily Beast, and it's just great. I like Evelyn Waugh. I like the way he writes anyway. I mean, I like Brideshead Revisited and Vile Bodies and things like that, but this is a great book about journalism.
Oh, it is. It's fabulous. It's probably, I don't know when I read it. I could have read it in the late 80s or sometime in the 90s, but I've loved it ever since. It's just, he is very funny. Like you mentioned, Vile Bodies, which is, you should not be making fun of that, but you know, it's like he does, and it works.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? You might feel guilty afterwards, but yeah. I mean, this was first published in 1938. But it's just a great book. Everybody should read it.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of his books, not everyone, but again, that's somebody that I want to go through. I keep rereading Brideshead Revisited, but I haven't reread any of his others. And like this one, Black Mischief, or you know, other wild ones. I can't think of the other titles, but I have not reread them, and I should, and because I'd love to go through and be immersed in his world again.
There's some that I haven't read at all. I don't think I've read Lady Helena. I was introduced to Evelyn Waugh at school when we did A Handful of Dust. That's quite. I've got quite a few of them because I buy them whenever I see them, ones that I don't have. But I don't think I've read The Loved One. I haven't read Officers and Gentlemen. There's another, he wrote a travel book as well. That I have, but equally I haven't read that one. I was going to say, but George Orwell. Hold on.
Yeah, I can't think of the name. Just read a few comments today. So there's a whole lot of dicks in the world today that could do with being collected. Yeah. Send them to Dildo, maybe Newfoundland or somewhere. Oh, excuse me. Oh, I got this cold.
There it is. No case. 92 days, and he is in Guyana and Brazil.
Yeah.
Not read it yet.
No, I actually, I might not have. I don't think I've read that one, because I've read his novels, but I don't think I've read that one. Well,
I
it's not a
haven't.
novel, but I mean, I haven't read it.
I've only read read fiction by him. I haven't read any non-fiction by him at all.
Gareth St. Debs, I love that you end with journalism must be something that is very close to your heart.
Oh, yeah. Spent a long time doing it.
Yeah, there is a book, Decline and Fall by Evelyn Waugh, in a bookstore. I didn't, let's jump here. I didn't consider buying it, as didn't know the author. Now I hear the name again. Have you read that? Yeah, that's the school one, isn't it? I think Decline and Fall, the public school one. That's good, and it's quite funny as well. It's quite funny. It's again, setting up, the hypocrisy at times and the elitism of public schools.
Absolutely. So, what do we have here? Little collection of Evelyn Waugh. So I've got here The Loved One.
Yeah.
Vile Bodies.
Yeah.
Helena. This is the trilogy. So this is Men at Arms, Officers and Gentlemen, and Unconditional Surrender. Black Mischief, Handful of Dust, Decline and Fall, Scoop. Where's my copy of Brideshead Revisited? And I've got Brideshead Revisited kicking about somewhere. But yeah, some of these ones I haven't actually read.
Yeah, the Sword of Honor trilogy is really good as well. That's really good.
I think I've only read Men at Arms. I haven't read the other two.
Well, that's another future buddy read, I think.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
Dave says here, not quite the same thing, I know, but I've always meant to get a photo at a road sign not too far from us that points to Witch Haven, Witchford, and Gavin.
Good sign with all three of them on there.
Yeah, that's cool.
There's a place in Cambridge near where I used to work called Prick Willow, which just makes me giggle because I'm childish.
Well, in is it Oxford or is it Cambridge? I'm trying to think. No, it's Oxford. It's there's a little walkway. It's called Parsons Passage.
In Guildford, there's one called Jeffrey's Passage.
Yeah. And I remember I took a photo of that and put it up on Twitter years and like decade or two ago, and nobody caught. Like, it's just like, clearly I did not have fun people following me at that time on Twitter. They didn't get it.
Some people are so dull.
Gareth said 2 places in Surrey on the same sign. We see it when we gig there. Hurtmore and Shackford. Yeah,
I know that's just outside, not far from Guildford, but there are some great ones around.
Now, music.
Do you know, I think it took me longer to whittle down what I was going to choose for my one solitary album than it did to choose the books. I went for...
Oh, I think I know what your luxury items is going to be now. Okay, sorry. It just ticked that I think I might know. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I went for Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell. And the reason I went for Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell, Blondie was a contender there. Okay. But I love to sing, right? I am really, really bad at it. Really bad. Nobody wants to hear me sing. But I'm thinking on a desert island, it doesn't matter, right? Because I'm deserted. I'm on a deserted island on my own. Meatloaf's Bat Out of Hell is in the right key for me. And I can bellow it to my heart's content on my desert island without having to hit ridiculously high notes because the key's too high or whatever. I absolutely love this album. I was 12 or 13, I think, when it came out. And I've always loved it. It's low battery. My phone has low battery. I'm going to take you off here, plug you into a phone charger, and no, you won't go back on now. I'm going to have to hold you because you won't go back on the stand with the phone charger in. Yeah, I absolutely love this. I love there's a variety in there. There's a couple I like more than others, but then sometimes I listen to it and think, no, that's actually really good. But yeah, I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I remember when it came out too, and it was definitely a hit. It was the first time I'd heard of Jim Steinman and everything. And other things that he did with Bonnie Tyler, and the Streets of Fire soundtrack later, just absolutely fabulous stuff. It was.
Apparently he developed this from a musical called Neverland, which was based on Peter Pan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. It was a project he'd done a few years earlier, like 74, 75. And it was a rock
opera,
sort of futuristic rock musical, but it was based on Peter Pan.
Oh, okay.
I don't get how, but there you go.
Yeah, Gareth was saying it's a nice classic album, but then he says, yeah, Paradise by the Dashboard Light is a whole musical in one song. Yeah.
I think that's probably my favorite.
I bet that pissed off a lot of parents if they understood what that actually was talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's what Paradise by the Dashboard Light is like 3 merged into one, and it is like a musical all in one. It's great, but the whole album is just. I don't think I've ever disliked it at all. It's not something that I've ever gone off. I've always enjoyed it. And it's one of the longest charting albums in the UK chart. Something like, well, it was over 500 weeks it spent in the British album charts.
So what's that? That's like 10 years, isn't it? Yeah.
That's like, yeah. I mean, that's longevity for you, isn't it? When your album spends 10 years in the charts, in the UK album charts, that's pretty impressive.
The sequel album, if you can call it that, the Dead Ringers, wasn't quite as good, but the song Dead Ringers with Cher was really good.
Dead Ringers.
Yeah,
that's really good.
that was really good, because I never would have expected their voices to work so well together.
No, and
I
they
guess,
did.
but they did, yes.
Yeah.
Gareth says, hey, Steinman and Meatloaf fell out because Steinman expected it to be double billing on the cover, which would be weird. A songwriter and singer as the artist. Yeah.
Yeah. I think Meatloaf dropped the lawsuit in the end, didn't he? The lawsuit was dropped. I can't remember which way round it was, but the lawsuit was dropped in the end because I think whichever one of them dropped it decided that they had too much going between them for too long to fall out over something like that. But yeah, they did fall out big time.
He had what's his Alan the Day O'Day, or Day, I think is his real name, Meatloaf's name. He died kind of horribly, I think, just recently. He had, I guess, he was sorry,
2022.
Yeah, because wasn't he waiting for back surgery or something like that then, because of COVID, I guess, or something, that it was delayed and like he couldn't move hardly at all.
Yeah.
Alex says, yeah, I would do anything for love. Gareth saying they made up and did the Bad Out of Hell 2 album, but that's how long it took. Okay, well, okay, now I'm is Bad Out of Hell 2 the Dead Ringers album, or is that a different one? Now I can't remember off the top of my head.
I don't know.
But I really like the Jim Steinman's Streets of Fire. Oh yeah, no, yeah, Dead Ringer is different. It is a different one. Yeah. And I don't think the Bad Out of 2 Hell is not. I don't remember anything off that, but I remember Dead Ringer. But I don't remember. So he wasn't associated with the Dead Ringer then. Is that the second album? Okay. But it's very Jim Steinman-esque still. It definitely is, if it's not him. That's interesting. Yeah, because I never followed up like any background to it. I just loved the music to it.
Yeah, I did too.
Oh, Dave says he grew up to hate it simply because everywhere I went for several years, people insisted on playing that bloody album. Yeah, I can understand that. I can understand, but I did like it. Like there's a few things that once you hear one note, you know what it is. It's like the other one that comes to mind is Copperhead Road by Steve Earle. It's just something you hear, you just immediately you know what it is. Oh, is that for Bad Out of Hell? Okay. Then I am completely screwed up of which album is which then, the Dead Ringer album. I thought that was where I Would Do Anything for Love is from. So okay, then I'm completely screwed up. I'm gonna have to figure out, maybe it's the Dead Ringer album, then that's the forgettable one. It must be then. But no, it is a great album, regardless of I didn't know anything about all the background stuff.
It's a great album.
Right. It was also a couple of years of great albums as well. That was a great couple of years of albums.
Late 70s, early 80s, I think, is a brilliant musical time period. And I'm probably biased because I think that's when I first really started taking an interest in music, because that's when I was in my early to mid-teens, and that's when my interest in music really started. Before that, I was listening to stuff that my parents listened to, rather than my own stuff. But I love that late 70s 80s period. I think it's great.
Yeah, I was just going to say this. I think what Gareth there says is correct.
Yeah,
We always love what we heard when we were in our teens. Human Nature.
yeah,
It's like, you know, like to me, Heart's first album, I think it's maybe 1976. Then you got Jackson Brown's Running on Empty. You got you know, Boston's first album. You've got I can't even think now. Rumors. You got the Meatloaf album. You know, you could just go on and on of those few
yeah,
years. You know, of great, or what I think is great rock and roll stuff that was coming out.
yeah. But then I also like things like Blondie.
Yeah, but then she started in the late 70s as well. Then,
Late
so yeah,
70s, exactly. I love Motown, but I also like ska and reggae. But yeah, Bow of Hell on a Desert Island, I can sing without upsetting anybody, and it would just be great. It's an album that you ought to sing very loudly to.
yes, and play loudly, I think too.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, New Wave. That's where New Wave was coming in. Yeah, that's Blondie. Was, you know, a transition, and that's where after that in the early 80s, I was lost during the 80s for most of the stuff. For most music during the 80s, it didn't work for me. A lot of the stuff, in retrospect, it does, but during the time, it didn't. Hannah's here. Greetings, folks. Late again, but I will watch the replay to catch up on what I missed. Yeah, we're almost at the end. So, what is your now? I wonder if I clicked it correctly. Is your luxury item?
Here's a clue.
Oh, okay. No, that's not what I thought. Because once we got to the music, I was thinking you were going to say a motorcycle.
No, not bothered about that. But I cannot survive without decent coffee. I need a barista coffee machine with an unlimited supply of coffee. I don't need milk. I don't need sugar, so I'm not asking for any extras. But I can't survive without a cup of coffee.
There might be a coffee plantation on the island too, so you'll be all set.
That would, you know, I'm quite willing to crush the beans myself after I've roasted them. But I do need the machine to make it.
I've been watching, like a lot of people, I think, the Reacher series that's on.
Oh, yeah.
And they give them a cup of coffee, and like it's like they say it's like the beans they fed to a cat, so it's gone through a cat's ass.
I used to have I had cups made up for the different offices that I used to visit, and on the back of it said double hit of coffee, black, no sugar. So whenever anybody asked me if I wanted a coffee, and I was awful. I never made coffee at work, ever, because it just didn't occur to me. And then someone would say, do you want a cup of coffee? And I'd just give them this mug, and it would occur to me that I needed coffee, and I needed coffee now, but I never thought of it for myself. So people brought me coffee all day. So I just had it printed on the back of a cup, double hit of coffee, no milk, no sugar. So there was no doubt no one ever got my coffee order wrong.
Well, when I was working, because I don't drink coffee, not at all. I never really have. I've had a few cups of coffee in my life, and I don't really care for it. But when I was working, the last place that I was working, like people would always say, "Oh, they're getting up. Oh, does anybody want a coffee?" And it's like they know not to ask me or after a while. And then somebody started complaining because when I got up to get a drink, like usually water, or if I had a juice in the fridge or something like that, they would complain, "Why am I not asking people for coffee? You know, offering coffee?" And I go, "Well, I don't drink coffee, so why should I ask other people if I want if they want a coffee. It doesn't. I'm not getting up the coffee. Coffee's not in my mind.
The people I worked with were wonderful, and they just kept me supplied with a virtually constant stream all day.
I gotta say, and he thought you were going to say tea. I was with you with tea.
I was telling Shawn earlier, I actually can't drink tea because it sort of makes me high. It feels like I ought not to drive after I've had tea. So I don't know what's in tea that isn't in coffee, but I never ever drink tea. The other thing is I don't drink milk. And coffee is much more palatable than tea, I think, without milk. But then I don't know really, because I don't drink that much tea.
Gareth saying that, yeah, he would miss tea too much. That definitely sounds like a worthy luxury, Hannah says.
Oh, yeah.
And going back to Bat of the Hell, I liked Bat of the Hell once. Went right off it. Now I don't mind it so much. Yeah. For me, it was early, late 60s and early 70s. But I'm very old. You wouldn't want to get high on a desert island. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yeah, I suppose. But I'd miss coffee too much. I like the taste. I like the smell. It's the first thing I do in the morning. I get up, get washed and dressed, come downstairs, put the coffee machine on, bring coffee out here. I like it to be cold, not the coffee. I don't mind it when I like it cold out here, but the coffee has got to be piping hot and very strong. And I do that every morning.
Jenny says going to have to rewatch this from the start. Sorry, was distracted with another live stream. Who's more important than this live stream? You know, Jenny.
Well,
you're on next week, Jenny. So I hope you're not distracted by another live stream. You're next week's Castaway.
Castaway, yes.
And Hannah says, I think I may need to try the tea you've tried. Yeah, I think someone spiked the tea. Yeah. That's like, because that's just this Kermit. People always like, I guess it's called Irish coffee. People put whiskey in tea. I mean, coffee. Whiskey and tea is not a thing.
No.
Is it?
I don't think Parisian, by the way. If you're going to have that, leave the whiskey out, put brandy in it, and have a nice Parisian coffee.
And yeah, I'll have what she's having.
Yeah.
I know, but the last thing I needed was yet another reminder of how daft my answers are compared. No, they're not. See, at least this way, Jenny, you are going to educate me on a lot of books and authors that I never heard of. Like Debs did today, at least with one. I know all the others, but I never heard of one book. Tea is high in tannins. Probably that's what you're reacting to.
Quite possibly.
So, and I think
not the caffeine, is it? Because, I drink mountains of black coffee.
A trick is to not squeeze the tea bag then.
Oh,
Let
really?
the tea bags soak and then take them out. Don't squeeze the tea bags. Because when you squeeze the tea bags, you get more tannins. And it makes the tea bitter as well. That's why. And I'll say this again, and I know Gareth just cringes when I say this. British people don't know how to make proper tea. They boil the water if they're lucky, pour it in a cup, and then squeeze the hell out of a tea bag, and then that's it. Or they put it in a microwave to heat the water. Abominations.
Is that not how you do it?
No, you boil. You get fresh water. Make sure there's lots of oxygen in it, and it's just as it's boiling. You then pour it into a teapot, preferably over loose tea. That's how it should be done. And then let it steep for a few minutes. And never, if you're using a tea bag, you never squeeze the tea bag. You take it out, or you take out the loose grains if you're in a tea pig, if you have a tea pig, or you strain.
Wow. You see, I'm useless at making hot drinks because I don't take milk. I don't take sugar. I literally load up a coffee machine and pour it into my cup. That's all I do. So if anybody else wants anything that involves more than just pouring something into a cup, they're stuffed. I'm useless at it.
And it says hot buttered rum can be very nice if you skip the butter and add tea rather than hot water. Okay. So it is something. I guess it is something, the tea and booze, which I didn't know. Yes. Well, I'm absolutely correct in this about making tea.
She's just drinking rum.
Well, and add tea rather than hot water.
If you take out the tea and you take out the hot buttered bit from the hot buttered rum, all you've got left is rum. And that works for me.
Oh, is that? But no, she's saying it's add tea rather than hot water. So is it that you're heating the tea, the rum, and you put the tea bag in the rum? Because you rather than hot water. So yeah,
I'm quite happy drinking rum.
So that could be interesting. My tea is amazing. Wow, I'll take your word for it, Gareth.
Yeah, so will I.
Amy says, I love tea, but I have to drink lots of water as well because the tannins make me thirsty. Ah, okay.
It's funny how different people have different reactions to things.
Oh, people still use, like, every time at work, anytime that there was, like, they would have a boiler that would just sit there and boil the water 24/7. Which is just horrid because it just boils all the oxygen out of the water. But when that broke down, there's a kettle. Nobody used the kettle. Tap cold water and put it in the microwave. That's actually dangerous because water can make a film. And if it gets to a certain temperature, when you put the spoon in, it can explode. And people have lost their eyes because of that, because they get a boiling water in their eyeball. So a little bit of cautionary desert island books. Dave says, I remember when Harlan Ellison came to a cult TV conversation in Great Yarmouth, and when he ordered a coffee in his hotel, they brought him a cup of Nescafe instead of coffee. Instant coffee. In New Orleans, I had to use a coffee maker to make tea. I brought my own tea bags. I just meant making it with tea rather than plain water. Okay. Okay.
I'm sure straight rum would be lovely too. I sound like a raging alcoholic.
It looks like we can't get this Desert Island books less than 2 hours and almost just under half, 2.5 hours. Wow. I guess that's going to be the new norm for this. And unless Jenny is correct, then we'll be 20 minutes for Jenny's. Then maybe. I don't think so.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been lots of fun.
Oh. Shall I look out for a message on Voxer from me after
this? You have been warned.
It's not about tea, though. Okay. Thanks, everybody, again for stopping by. And well, we should be back I should be back next week. I do want to caution is because I accidentally subscribed to an unlimited service on StreamYard, free for a week. Now, I did it accidentally because I wanted to see how much or how long it was going to be, but then all of a sudden it said I've accepted it. And if I quit it before the time, I lose everything for the month. So this runs out, I think, on the 19th. So it could mean that once that runs out, I have no more hours for the rest of the month. So if that's the case, I'll make a video to say, sorry, I can't do any more live videos or any videos like this until April, until my free 20 hours per month starts again. So, but I'll let everybody know, and my internet too. But it's been, I think there's been a few problems. It's not as strong as it was, but I think we got through fairly good, or fairly well with this. And Gareth says it's a nice message. Thank you, lovely Sibo. Thanks, Hannah, for stopping by, and thanks, Joseph. You. And usually, I always wind up waiting for other messages to come in. Nothing comes in, and then StreamYard is free. Yeah, well, it is. You get 20 hours free per month, and then you get blocked, or you have to pay a fee. And the fee that I'm on now is $90 US a month. You can go drop down to the next level, which is $50 US a month. That's still ridiculously too expensive. So I just will have to try to keep in with the 20 hours of free per month from now on. Mm. So again, thanks everybody. Oh, okay. That's what I mean. Like, there's such a delay of messages coming up. It's always been free for me, and I've been using it for ages now. It's free. Yeah, you be only for 20 hours, Gareth. If you go over 20 hours in a month, you won't be able to do any more. And then you're limited to the number of guests you have on, to 6 in total. I can put 10 people on here now if I wanted to, but that's only for the free trial period. So yeah. So that's the difference. Anyway, I will say bye, everybody. Stick around for a bit, Debs, when I end. So bye, everybody, and thanks again for stopping by.
Thanks.